Hey now, hey now. This is your girl, Deanna, traveling through the Lisa, and I'm here with my girl T Michelle. We here today to dive into a topic that comes up quite often in internet circles, and that is Africa isn't poor. But we here to tell you, baby, but a lot of the people are. So T Michelle, what you drinking on today, girl?
Well, today I'm giving a shout out to South Africa. I got some vanilla robust tea.
Ah, well, for me, since I just came back from traversing over in Morocco, I am drinking on some tea from one of my favorite herborists there. It's called royalty tea. I'm not sure what's all in it, but it's like a, I would say, mint tea with a kick, and it's fabulous. So now we're gonna dive in on into this topic of Africa's not poor, but a large amount of the people are. So for me, you know that I have this up a lot because it grinds my gears when I'm constantly seeing things like this is Africa and it's showing all these mansions and people popping bottles and this and that, especially in countries like Nigeria, South Africa, etc. And it's like people don't leave outside of that small the island in Nigeria or Joburg or Cape Town here in South Africa because I'm like, I done been to both places, and baby, let me tell you, the kind of poverty you see, it is not like poverty you see in other parts of like the Americas or Europe, like people want to say. Um, People know that I love Nigeria when I would travel there, but the inequality there is glaring. I was looking at some exhibit, I believe it's from the CIA World Facts, and it was saying that 70% of the people in Nigeria live in extreme poverty. 70%. Meanwhile, you got all these Nigerians and black Americans as well loving to brag about the money that's going on in Nigeria. People, yeah, right? They talk about the Danotes and things like that. But how can you even celebrate something like that when you got that kind of people living in poverty? Then I say, you move to the north, which is like the capital, Abuja. The northern part of Nigeria has some of the worst health outcomes when it comes to children and women, and the highest rate of people living, once again, in extreme poverty, but it's also home to some of the wealthiest. For me, I think it's time for us to stop glamorizing the extremes in Africa, the extremely wealthy or I already saying it paints it off. Because AB, the extreme that we have moved to today in regards to just focusing on, oh, we can't keep showing that Africa's poor. Maybe we need to show it more because it is unfair to the people who are living in the level of poverty that they live in while we glamorize wealth from the few. What say you, girl?
Uh, I don't know. I kind of see both sides on this one. Uh, yes, there is a lot of graft in Africa on the continent. There definitely is a lot of flossy show off behavior. But I mean, I think that you have this in other places too. I think is probably more bothersome in Africa because of the extreme poverty that's there and the extensive rate of poverty. But this idea that floats around about, everybody being corrupt and corruption being a problem. I think it is a problem and certainly one that needs to be dealt with. um, but there's corruption in Europe, there's corruption in USA. I mean, I would say the USA is probably one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. So I mean, if we're going to place blame, then we have to place blame all over. Um, I don't discount the poverty here because I see it on a daily basis and it certainly exists. Um, but, at the end of the day, I think that's something for the people to decide that they've had enough. And clearly they've not had enough yet.
Girl, you ain't said nothing with that one. You know my as the people would say, "Oh, we going home," and we. Nope, I do not believe it's my place as an American to tell an African, whether it's a South African, a Nigerian, a Gambian, a Cameroon, that they should be tired of anything. You like it, I love it. It's my motto. So I agree with you 100% there. In regards to the app and the whole issue of corruption, I'm here in South Africa, and girl, you can't watch the news one day without them talking about corruption under state capture. That's what they call it, state capture. And they love to bring up Zuma, talking about Zuma state capture. What? People will not believe me when I keep telling them I moved here when Zuma was still president and life was different. You cannot tell me that it was that better. So they can keep trying to talk about corruption all they want. My issue is this, and I tell people here this: corruption is everywhere, as you said, even the Americas, Europe, whatever. And we get real. Typically, when these African leaders involved in corruption, who they involved with? American and European, countries, right? But what I find here is that it's not the corruption that's the issue. It's the lack of empathy, compassion, love for their fellow countrymen. That's the real issue. Like, they don't just steal some of the money. They want to steal all the money. Like, they want to steal 95% of the money. That's not what you see in America and Europe. They gonna steal some money, maybe 40, 50, but things are still gonna get done. Here, literally, folks will steal 90, 95% of the money and think it's okay. Like, who does that? And I feel like until we start having these serious conversations about the issue, like I said, we brought up a few episodes ago, that Africans don't like Africans, right? We can't even touch on the issue of why are all these people poor when their individual respective countries are not. We cannot just keep saying, "Oh, the Europeans, we got to change the colonizers away. China's taking." No, it starts at home. It starts on the fact that even in villages, people will be okay with one person having all the money. And the only reason why they don't say that is because the people are actually looking for, like, how can I too be the person that can steal the money like that? Not that stealing all the money is wrong, just how can I benefit from stealing all the money?
See, I don't completely agree with that. I mean, I think that most people here who are living in poverty, and particularly those who are living in extreme poverty, they're trying to survive. Like, they really don't even have the time to think about, what these leaders are doing, the corruption, um, and things of that nature. Like, they're trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from, where they're going to have a roof over their head. And so I just can't blame them, but I do blame, a lot of what we would consider, more elite or middle class people, because they do seem to have the attitude, well, hey, I'm living good, it's not affecting me, so too bad for them. And it's very perplexing for me. I mean, the USA, I think poverty rate there is only about 12% officially. I think unofficially it's probably a lot more, particularly amongst Black Americans. um, But here on the continent, you're probably looking at something more like 70 or 80% poverty rates for the entire continent. So I mean, when we talk about, just the levels of poverty, I mean, there really is no comparison. Um, and I don't know how to address it, because I hear a lot of Africans complain about the leaders. I mean, if you talk about, what the problems are in Africa, that's going to be the first thing you say is the government, it's the leadership. But ultimately, how do those leaders get there? And how do they stay there? I mean, I don't know. I try not to talk on, other people's governmental business because I don't like when it happens amongst us, and it happens quite a lot. But that's a topic for another day.
Me too.
um, but I don't know. It's just something that I can't understand. There seems to be this knowledge that everyone has of what the source of the problem is, but no one seems able or willing to fix it. And I don't know how does that happen.
See, and that's where we are the leaders. Yes, and we know for a lot of countries, people aren't even really voting for that. We know that the West, whoever is helping to put whoever they want in power. I still believe a large part of it is a corruption of the people. I have two stories for you. One, years ago, it was a Nigerian mine, right? He was telling me a story about how, let's say it was a minister who came up with this new idea for his area, something with schools. So he talked to like the mayor. And then the mayor had to go to the superintendent. And the superintendent had, of course, presented to the teachers. And then it goes down and down. So it started off the project, each child had to contribute, say, 100 naira. I'm just picking a number out. It's not that, right? So then he goes. By the time he gets to the mayor now goes and presents it to the superintendent of schools and tells them each child needs to contribute 200, right? And then now the superintendent gonna go to the principals at the schools and be like, hey, every child needs to contribute 300 naira. And then by the time it gets to the teachers are told every child got to contribute 400 naira. So the teacher then goes to the class and tells the students what? You all need to contribute 500 naira. You see how they keep snowballing. So now little day goes home, mama, the teacher said, we all need to contribute what? 600 naira. Right. And then the mom says, no worry, my child, no worry. I'll talk to your father tonight. The father comes home. The mom then talks to the father and says, hey, they went to class and the teacher said they all need to bring 700 naira. So you see how this was snowballed from 100 idea. And see, at the time, I was like, don't be saying that about your people. It's not true. But after traveling here so much and living here and being married into these countries, he's right. And until you start owning it, like G.I. Joe says, no one is half the battle, right? Until you own what the problem is, how can you improve it? And to me, that is the case in a lot of countries. The corruption is so embedded into the fiber of the people that they can't be like the UAE. Like when the UAE discovered oil, they got corruption there, and you still see they have an elite class. But because they have a love and affection for the people who are Emirati, they was like, we all got to come up to at least this level, right? So when Emirati go around the world, people don't look at them as scum because they Emirati. They not on the same level as us as the royal class, but they still need to be above everybody else in the world. And there's now one country, Mauritius might be an exception, where most Africans don't think like this. They are okay with everybody around them living in a level of filth and squalor, while they the one person living in a big house with walls up to who knows to the sky almost, so they can walk and be like, I'm the man, I'm the woman. And until that mindset changes, to me nothing will change. But at the same time, I personally don't care if it do, because it's not my headache. I acknowledge that, guys. I'm not. I'm not one of the Black Americans who's still stuck on this notion of, oh, I'm coming to the motherland. I'm not. So when they tell me I'm not African, you absolutely right. Don't speak on my country. I'd be like, you absolutely right. Carry on doing as you do, but don't come to me asking me to donate anything. Don't come to me asking me to feel sorry, because, like you said, it ain't my problem. Story number two. I have quite a few Congolese acquaintances, associates, and I've been there. And the one thing that struck me was the amount of dollars moving through. This is Kinshasa, not Brazzaville. And I'm like, we constantly talking about the east poverty in Congo. But girl, when I tell you, even as an American, I felt poor. Because I was like, they was moving, but they was using $100 bills like we use 10. And then when you talk to people about this, they their mindset is the people who might not be involved in corruption but are trying to build something, right? And they will say no because they set in boundaries. they get labeled as selfish because they don't want to just give, right? But the person who's sitting there living amongst everybody else who living in shacks or sometimes just under awnings, who got closets full of money, and they notice people got closets full of money from who knows what, right? They celebrate that person. And my friend was literally telling me, she's like, no, Jenny, you don't understand. He will give us money when you have a problem, and it's okay, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but why aren't you questioning why he has the closet full of money and you have nothing? They don't. They're okay because they've gotten conditioned to somebody giving them handouts. They're okay with that. And the person who's trying to improve for the collective, they consider selfish. To me, that's the real problem on the continent, not just corrupt leaders. That's just me.
Yeah, I think that's true to some extent. I mean, I think that there is definitely what I call a mindset of lack. And so people are so used to not having uh, that their actions are centered around trying to get just a little bit of scraps, a little bit of scraps here, instead of, like you said, demanding more and getting everybody to a point where we at least have a basic level of decent living. And, there just really is no reason that this shouldn't be happening, because when you look at the natural resources that, these countries hold, and what is their real wealth, it's just, I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's just really hard to reconcile all of these resources that you can see and contrast that to the extreme poverty that you also see everywhere. It's just, I mean, it's really can be unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, I think that there is just going to have to be a change of mindset, and it's very interesting because in a lot of ways we've always been told, oh, Africans are very communal, and in a lot of ways they are. But this is just one way that they're not, and it's so interesting to me.
You can believe that communal nonsense if you want to, but that's a topic for another day. I'm not even touching that today. But what I do know is, at least for me, people should be embarrassed. And that's the part that, that boggles my mind. You can have, and part of this I think is an anti-American sentiment in general, not just Black American. But they can and try and tell you why Americans are poor in the U.S. this, that, or the other, while not looking at what's really going on in their home countries and not being embarrassed by it. That's the part that gets me. Like, I shouldn't be seeing all these fucking influencers talking about we have this or this person, this, that, or the. It shouldn't be happening because you should be embarrassed because so many of your countrymen are living in a level of poverty that people can't wrap their minds around. And like you mentioned the poverty rate in the US. And I'm like, yes, even in the US, it's questioned like what is poverty rate? Because they throw out these numbers and say if you live below this and you consider poverty. But we all know even people who are above it, right, are still really in poverty. Like here during COVID, they implemented this a grant for people who don't have children but are unemployed. It's 350 rand. Okay, 350 rand. At that time, the rand to the dollar, I think, was about 15. It's worse than that now. It was about 15. So you're talking about a little over $20. And they were like, thought they were doing something. And that was only for those in the extreme poverty range, right? So even if you take three fifty, right? And you talk about because we say things are more affordable here. I believe the minimum wage at the time was 3,500 rent a month, right? And you think giving somebody 350 is doing something? And that's only for the extreme poverty. So that lets you know, even when people say extreme poverty, that you're still talking about people who dealing with a level of poverty that people can't wrap their heads around. If only the extreme impoverished qualify for the 350. And for me, I just feel like we have got to start looking in the air. Yes, there are issues with the West doing things. Yes, there's issues with puppet governments. We saw that recently with the whole situation in Gabon. But we have to start looking at individual people, individual communities. I tell my husband the same thing. I said, he comes from an area that's a kingdom, and they love to brag about the Bamboo Kingdom, right? So I said, yet, what's going on there? Well, the government doesn't do this. Outside of the government, what are you as a people doing? How many of these bigger countries who have, people who they love to brag about the cousins, the aunties, the this one, that one, who live foreign, who live in Europe, who live in Americas, right? These people who might send home to their mamas to build them a big house. But what about your community? I said, even if the governments were lax, which we know they are, right? If your small village area, the people who live foreign, started just sending small amount of money to improve infrastructure in that area, improve well. I mean, granted, I will say this: some of them did get together and do like they call a borehole here, which is a well for his part of. So it happens on a small scale in some areas, but when you're talking about the level of wealth that some of these countries have of people outside of their country, there is no excuse. We cannot just keep looking at government. We have to start looking at these people who prefer to sit on social media and spray money and talk about how life is so good for them, but do absolutely nothing at home, but then turn around and want to start begging you as a black American, telling you why you need to come home and help build up the country. Make it make sense. If the true diasporans, those who are only 1 or 2 years away, aren't doing a damn thing to build up the country, why should we? Please make it make sense.
I was actually just going to say that. I mean, there is this huge push, towards the diaspora. And when I say diaspora, I'm speaking of us, in the more distant diaspora. People who are coming from the U.S., the Caribbean, or whatever. Oh, come to Africa, come here and invest. And like you said, it just the whole concept is just so interesting to me because, like you said, you have first of all, you have a bunch of don't get it twisted. There are millionaires and billionaires that are on the continent. Some of these are legitimate businessmen. They're very rich people. And so there are people here that have money. There are people here that could certainly be improving the condition of their people. And they don't need the diaspora to come and invest because they could and should be doing it themselves. But this push towards us is very interesting because I don't know how is it that we're supposed to solve the problem of this continent of over a billion people when, like you said, you have your own recent diaspora that have, for whatever reason, a lot of them aren't doing anything. I won't say that they're doing nothing, but it just certainly seems to me like they could be doing more. Particularly when you go to some of these rural areas and see, how people are living, it's unbelievable.
Girl, you have said absolutely. Well, we didn't dive into this tea, and we know it's served hot, but sometimes it got to be that way because this is Africa, and we only showing mansions and pools and this, that, and the other, and fancy restaurants. It's got to stop. It's got to be a balance. Is that true? Yes. But we also need to start holding people more accountable and expecting more from those who are living that way. So that's it for this episode of the African Tea. Thank you for joining us. And remember, if you liked what you saw, or even if you didn't, feel free to like, subscribe, or share. See you on the next episode of the African Tea.
Bye, guys.